we do that the next week.
Question to the Taoiseach and Minister for Foreign Affairs and Trade. First question is in the name of Deputy Brendan Smith. I call him the Taoiseach.
Lascan Corla, I have discussed the ongoing situation in relation to the flag protests and the upcoming marching season with the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland, Theresa Villiers, on a number of occasions, most recently in Dublin on the 11th of February last. I have also discussed these issues in ongoing contacts with the party leaders in Northern Ireland. The particular problem posed by non-notified parades has been a matter of some comment recently. My understanding is that the interpretation of certain provisions of the Public Processions Northern Ireland Act 1998, under which the Parade Commission acts, is likely to arise in the context of an imminent judicial review. Accordingly, it would be inappropriate for me to comment further at this stage. However, I think it is important to note that while only a small number of applications related to the flag protests have been made to the Parades Commission, almost 200 people have been arrested in relation to these protests since they began on December 3rd. I would like to record the Government's support and appreciation for the efforts of the Police Service of Northern Ireland to protect the community there throughout weeks of public disorder. I would also like to record our absolute support for the role and mandate of the Parades Commission and for the Commissioners and their staff who willingly take on work that, while critical for society in Northern Ireland, is often thankless. Parades do not operate solely in a regulatory environment. They operate in a political framework too. Where that political framework is weak or inadequate, the Parades Commission and indeed the Police Service of Northern Ireland are required to bear an added burden of responsibility. We will continue, therefore, to take every opportunity to urge the party leaders and the Executive to address these issues urgently and in a manner that advances the lasting reconciliation which is at the heart of the agreement and must remain our shared objective.
As Concordia, and thank Taoiseach for his reply. Since I tabled this question last Thursday night, there has been a huge coverage in regard to this particular issue in the media. And I think one very strong message we got from a senior police officer states very, very clearly that judicial clarity is needed on parading laws. And I think you've referred to that yourself, and we wait judicial review. Hopefully that can be finalised as soon as possible. As the Taoiseach is aware, this coming weekend will be the 11th consecutive Saturday that we have parades in Belfast, and we have known of the trouble that has emanated from those non-notified parades. And it's absolutely farcical that the flag marches around City Hall, they are parades, but they're not classified as parades and they're not within the jurisdiction of the Parades Commission because they have not been notified. And I think all the other parades outside Belfast that were connected with the new protocols in regard to the Union flag flying were notified to the Parades Commission and came under their jurisdiction. And there was very, very weak commentary, to say the least, to be very charitable about it, in regard to the reasons for the postponement of the Crusaders and Cliftonville soccer game last Saturday evening, when we had senior unionist people talked about events caused the postponement of a game. Taoiseach, there is absolute concern, and I've spoken to some political leaders, as you have on a constant basis, and I've spoken to members of the community. There is a great fear in many communities in Northern Ireland, particularly in Belfast, with the marching season imminent. It begins this coming Saturday, that this particular issue needs to be addressed with the utmost urgency, and the clarity needs to be brought to the jurisdiction of the Parades Commission in regard to parades as we know them, and as was provided for with the establishment or the enactment of the 1998 Public Procession Act. So could I ask Taoiseach to ensure that again that this issue is kept on the agenda with the British Government at senior level, with Secretary of State and with the members of the Northern Ireland Executive and with the political leaders there as well?
Well, first of all, I want to assure you, Deputy Smith, that this is very much on our agenda. The Parades Commission, as you know, was established at the height of the Drumcree parade-related violence under the Public Processions Northern Ireland Act 1998. And the policy underpinning that act was to remove from the police the dual responsibility of taking decisions on parades and then having to police their own decision. Again, I want to say that the government strongly supports the work and the mandate and the role of the Parades Commission. For obvious reasons, I don't want to talk about the judicial review that is imminent. But in view of forthcoming parades passing Short Strand and other interfaces in Belfast, both the Irish and British governments are of the view that the Parades Commission needs to be strongly supported and that its determinations must be respected. And I would urge all parties to engage with local residents at interfaces to identify compromise solutions that respect the wishes of both marchers and resident communities. And we will continue our efforts to work with the Northern Ireland political leadership on these issues.
Deputy Smith, briefly.
Thank you, Tánaiste. Actually, what we have witnessed over the past 10 weeks is the remit of the Parades Commission not being respected by people organising parades on a weekly basis at least, and sometimes midweek as well. In view, on the morning of the 11th of February, I listened to both yourself and Tánaiste and the Secretary of State, Ms Villiers, speak about the need for a greater urgency to be attached to a resolution of the underlying problems of sectarianism by the executive in Northern Ireland and by the political leaders as well. In view of the urgency of dealing with this particular issue and the potential for it to escalate, and hopefully that does not happen, could I ask Tánaiste if one particular proposal that has been mentioned by one political party would be if he would agree that on Taoiseach and Prime Minister Cameron should convene a meeting with the 5-party political leaders in Northern Ireland to have a major meeting at that level, at Prime Minister and at Taoiseach level, along with the leaders of the 5 political parties represented in Stormont in the Northern Ireland Assembly, to give this, to give the need or the resolution of this particular issue that much needed impetus. Because, as I said earlier, the marching season begins this coming Saturday, and as you said, Tánaiste, that particular parade passes by the interface area near Short Strand as well. And we don't want to see the violence on the streets of Belfast and in other towns that we witnessed in December and January. Thank you, that's
Well, every opportunity is taken to impress on the political leaders in Northern Ireland the importance of having an agreed position in relation to parades, in relation to the whole issue of the shared future, and in particular in relation to responding to street violence when it occurs. The position of both the Irish and British government has been expressed very clearly by both Secretary of State Villiers and I. We have expressed it jointly when we met with the First Minister and Deputy First Minister in the Quad format. We have each separately communicated our views, and it's a shared view by both governments of how this issue is to be dealt with in our discussions with leaders of political parties. Those discussions are continuing. I think the critical issues in the period ahead is, first of all, that there's a clear support for the Parades Commission, that there is clear support for the police service of Northern Ireland and the work that they have to do, and that there is an agreed opposition by political leadership in Northern Ireland to street violence and to some of the things that's causing the street violence. I am aware that the Open Society Justice Initiative report, Globalising Torture, CIA Secret Detention and Extraordinary Rendition, contains a compilation of existing publicly available material on the subject of extraordinary rendition. It does not contain any new information or make any new allegations in respect of Ireland. In particular, it does not allege that any person has ever been subject to extraordinary rendition through Irish airspace or Irish airports. This government is completely opposed to the practice of extraordinary rendition. I have addressed the issues raised in this report on a number of occasions in this House when I have stated that Ireland does not tolerate and will not tolerate the use of our airspace or airports for any illegal purpose, including torture, rendition or the unauthorised detention of any individual. In this regard, the current programme for government states clearly that this government will enforce the prohibition of the use of Irish airports and related facilities for purposes not in line with the dictates of international law. The permission of the Irish government must be sought and obtained for the transport of prisoners through Irish airports. I made it clear in this House on the 22nd of May 2012 that under no circumstances will we grant permission for the transport of prisoners who are subject to extraordinary rendition. Immediately following the first reports which suggested that the United States was carrying out extraordinary rendition in order to transit prisoners, the then government demanded and received specific assurances from the US authorities that such prisoners had not been transferred through Irish territory, nor would they without our permission. I am satisfied with these assurances, which were confirmed at the highest political level. They are of a clear and categoric nature relating to facts and circumstances within the full control of the United States government. It is likely that a small number of commercially leased aircraft which have been involved in legitimate commercial activities have also been involved at various other times in activities relating to extraordinary renditions. However, there is no evidence to suggest that any of these aircraft were carrying prisoners at any time when they transited through Irish airports, including Shannon Airport.
I think, yes, you're right in relation to the report itself. It's a compilation of testimonies gathered by human rights organisations. It brings together various court documents, official sources and so on. But it also does link that it talks in terms of the link in the apprehension and transfer of 3 suspects to aircraft flight schedules that included stopovers at Shannon between 2002 and 2004. And I suppose, I welcome the fact you're saying that, this government will not, or the previous government said they wouldn't grant permission to transfer prisoners to Irish airspace. The difficulty, in my memory at the time, was that the government at the time took it on face value, the assurances that were given at the time. And the difficulty we have is that we now know that up to 170 possible flights went through Ireland, and possibly 3 of these had suspects on board. So the difficulty is, I suppose, what I want to really hear from yourself today is, one, can you give assurances to this House that if it happened in the past, it'll never happen again? And how can we reassure people who are concerned in relation to these possible renditions that happened in the past, that Irish airspace, or Irish, and more importantly Irish airports, will not be used by other states in relation to this?
I call Minister.
Yes, well, first of all, I think I want to make it clear that there is no evidence that any persons were transited through Shannon Airport for the purposes of extraordinary rendition or who were involved in it. I think that what the reports refer to, and what this recent report from the Open Society Justice Initiative refers to, was the fact or their belief that certain aircraft, commercial aircraft, which they believed were used for extraordinary rendition purposes elsewhere, stopped at Shannon Airport. Now, to put this in context, over the period of time concerned, there were, my note tells me, over 1,700 commercial aircraft that came through Shannon Airport within that period of time. There's nothing wrong with commercial aircraft coming through Shannon Airport. Frankly, I think we would all wish that there were more commercial aircraft coming through Shannon Airport. What we have to be clear about, however, is that, firstly, and you asked about the question of assurances, if prisoners are to be transported through Shannon Airport, or indeed through any Irish airport, they must have permission from the Irish government, must seek and obtain permission from the Irish government. Under no circumstances will we, as a government, grant permission for the transport of prisoners who are subject to extraordinary rendition. That is the clear position of the government, and that's the assurance I want to give you and to the House.
Deputy Crowe.
just back up, what are we going to do differently in relation to what was done in the past in relation to, there's still concern in relation to it. There's still court cases pending in relation to, still many suspects still there's one suspect that was mentioned is still in Guantanamo Bay in relation to. So what can we do as a society different than we did in the past in relation to? Because we do know that people were transferred through European airspace in relation to. If we're in denial in relation to what happened in Ireland, it certainly happened in different parts around Europe in relation to it. So what can we do as a country in relation to that matter?
Well, again, firstly, I want to repeat, we do not know. We have no evidence. There is no information that anybody was, any prisoner was transported through an Irish airport who was the subject of extraordinary rendition. The closest that anybody has come to making a linkage with Irish airports is by suggesting that some aircraft which may have been used elsewhere and at a different time in respect of extraordinary rendition travelled through Shannon Airport. You ask what is different. What is different is that we have made a clear, the current government, present government has made a clear commitment in our programme for government which states that we will enforce the prohibition of the use of Irish airports and related facilities for purposes not in line with the dictates of international law. There is a requirement, first of all, where overflights are concerned, there's a requirement to seek our permission, where there's prisoners are being transported through Irish airports. Again, there is a requirement for permission to be sought. And if at any time we get evidence that there is breach of that, we will have our law enforcement people take action on it.
In relation to this matter, that's what people want to hear. We're going to do things differently in relation to it.
There is no produced any evidence.
We have to make progress now. Question 3, Chapter Maureen Sullivan. I call on the Taoiseach.
Genuine concerns, Lascan Corla, have repeatedly been raised about several aspects of this case by deputies in the House. And I have raised concerns, very frankly, with the British government over the past 2 years, most recently when I met the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland last Monday, the 11th of February. The individual in question was sentenced in 1973 to 2 life terms and to 20 years imprisonment to run concurrently on charges arising from the bombing of the Old Bailey. She was released in 1980. She has been detained since the 13th of May 2011 following the revocation of her life licence by the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland. I discussed the specific issue of her royal prerogative of mercy and the life licence at some length last year with the then Secretary of State for Northern Ireland. He informed me that the royal prerogative of mercy no longer exists, but that the issue had been considered by the parole commissioners in Northern Ireland, who are tasked with making recommendations to the Secretary of State in relation to parole in such cases. The parole commissioners had concluded that the royal prerogative related to the determinate sentence of 20 years and not to the 2 life sentences. Their ruling stated that the life sentences were not in fact remitted by the royal prerogative of mercy and that the individual remained subject to the life licence. The Secretary of State informed me that he had revoked that licence under the powers contained in Article 9(1) of the Life Sentences Northern Ireland Order 2001. I have received a full briefing on the assessment of an Oireachtas delegation that recently visited the individual. I understand that the parole commissioners will consider the issue of her continued detention in the coming weeks. In the meantime, I can assure the House that my officials will continue to monitor developments in relation to the case very closely.
I do want to acknowledge, you met the group who had travelled to McGabry, and I do know the representations you've made to Secretary of State Villiers. But there seems to be a huge grey area on this. Marion Price and her late sister Dolores were given this royal prerogative of mercy back in May of 1980. And the way in which her solicitor then spoke to her, she was given the impression that this covered all of the sentences and that it was not subject to licence. And it appears now that there seems to be circumstantial evidence that it is subject to licence. So that's the first. It's a very grey area, and it seems to be being misused by the authorities in the north. I mean, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, Article 9, no one shall be subjected to arbitrary arrest, detention or exile. And she has been subjected to that, as have other prisoners, which I know we'll be talking about later. So one of my questions to you is, will you make representations to the Minister for Justice? Because under Article 7 of the Life Sentences Northern Ireland, he has the power to release Marion Price on humanitarian and compassionate grounds. And certainly those of us who visited last week can see a very serious deterioration in her physical health, her mental health, her emotional health. And there are grave fears for that health. The review is happening now at the beginning of March, with parole commissioners who are appointed by the Secretary of State. So where is the fairness that she's going to be granted when that review comes up at the beginning of March?
Margaret Taoiseach.
Well, first of all, can I say that I have already discussed with the Northern Ireland Minister for Justice, David Ford, issues relating to this prisoner, indeed to other prisoners, and the conditions in which they are being held. You have described the licence process and the issues that arose in that area, and as you're aware, there was also a court case which was involved here. My understanding is that the parole commissioners are due to consider her case very shortly. My information is that 3 dates have now been identified for the hearing of that case. It's coming up very shortly, and that it's intended that the commissioners will make a decision shortly after that. As I said, I discussed it most recently with Secretary of State Villiers, and I'm aware that you and other members of the House have been visiting her in where she's detained.
Okay, thank you. The parole commissioners, their remit doesn't give them investigative powers, so they're just going to go based on whatever they're handed, which she's not going to have any idea about. I mean, will this be held in public, in the interest of due process and justice and fairness and transparency? And I hope there will be, and I'm just wondering, can you even ensure that it will be held in public, so that there will be, transparency over the case and what is happening there? And if at the very least, if it's not going to be in public, that they will allow a representative from this government to attend in the interest of justice.
Thank you, Deputy. Taoiseach.
Well, the representatives of this government are keeping a very, very close eye on what is happening in this case, and my officials in Belfast are very, very much in touch with this case. They and report to us regularly. I am taking a particular ongoing interest in it, as you know. We are in continuing contact with the British authorities about it, with the Department of Justice in Northern Ireland, and we will continue to maintain that level of contact.
Sorry, David.
Can one of them attend? Can you request that? One of the officials from the Northern Ireland.
You can be assured that our officials will be monitoring it very, very closely.
Margaret Keshikar, priority question in the name of Deputy Brendan Smith, and I call on the Taoiseach.
The welfare of the Irish abroad in general, and especially the position of undocumented Irish immigrants in the United States, remains an important priority for the government. A resolution of the situation for undocumented Irish immigrants will continue to be pursued by the government in our ongoing contacts with the United States administration and Congress. The advice of Ireland's friends and contacts within the United States administration and Congress has long been that comprehensive reform of the US immigration system and procedures is likely to be the only manner by which such a resolution can be achieved. The prospects for such reform would appear to have advanced in the wake of President Obama's re-election. The emphasis he placed on immigration reform in his inauguration address, as well as his subsequent speech on the issue on the 29th of January and his State of the Union address on the 12th of February, all send a very positive signal in this regard. The indications of emerging bipartisan support for reform in Congress are also encouraging. Although work is underway in the Senate and the House of Representatives, full proposals have not yet been tabled, and we will monitor closely any proposals as they emerge in the coming weeks and months. Through our embassy in Washington and in close liaison with Irish American community representatives, our contacts with the US administration and Congress continue with a view to ensuring that the interests and concerns of undocumented Irish immigrants are captured in any future legislative deal in this area that emerges. In this regard, I have raised the issue with the then Secretary of State Hillary Clinton during our bilateral meeting on the 6th of December last, and recalled our strong support for comprehensive immigration legislation and the passage of E3 visas for Irish citizens. I am currently engaged in a round of telephone discussions with key US senators to discuss prospects for progress and to underline our ongoing interest in the issue. The Taoiseach discussed immigration reform when he spoke with President Obama to congratulate him on his re-election. The issue will remain a critical element of the government's engagement with the US authorities, including over the forthcoming St Patrick's Day period. My programme and that of other members of the government during that period, while not yet finalised, will include discussions with key political figures on the immigration and with the Irish community groups that provide assistance to the undocumented.
To interrupt the Taoiseach there, the rest of the reply will appear in the official report. Deputy Smith.
Taoiseach for his reply. I suppose it's quite clear that assistance or regularising the position of the undocumented Irish has to be part of a comprehensive immigration reform programme. And I welcome the fact, as the Taoiseach did, that President Obama in two major speeches recently placed a certain priority on a legislative initiative to deal with this particular issue. And I also welcome the fact that there's a cross-party support and cross-party working together on devising a worthwhile initiative. Would I be correct in thinking, Taoiseach, that priority for Irish lobbyists has traditionally been the provision of E3 visa, which would give about 10,500 Irish undocumented the legal status to work in the US for up to 2 years. Now, we hope that the proposed reform will be successful, but one particular concern that I read about from one of the Irish lobby groups was that the period in time spoken about was an 8-year reform period. Now, we've a lot of probably 30 to 50,000 undocumented Irish in the United States who, in the meantime, want to go about their work in a normal way, and who may need to travel home, as any individual does, to the family. Does the Taoiseach have any indication at this stage what is the likely timeline for an initiative being enacted, should such an initiative be successful through Congress?
Well, first of all, there are two aspects to this. First of all, there is the position of the undocumented Irish in the United States, and we estimate that there are about 50,000. And as you said, Deputy Smith, some of these are people who have been living in the United States for quite some time. They can't come home for a funeral. They're living in a very difficult set of circumstances, and we're clearly anxious to get their position regularised. The second issue was the idea that we had been advancing for the E3 visa. This would enable new Irish immigrants, if you like, to go and work in the United States, and the model for that was the E3 arrangement that Australia had negotiated. I suppose the big change that has taken place, which took place over the period of the US presidential election, is the clear political determination, which is a bipartisan determination now in the United States to introduce legislation on comprehensive immigration reform. Overall, our understanding is that this is potentially legislation that could cover about 11 million immigrants in the US. What we want to do is we want to ensure that the needs of the Irish, undocumented Irish, are included in any such legislative reform. And that's why we are discussing it directly with the US administration, and why we're also discussing it with senators and congressmen on both sides of the political aisle in the US.
Very briefly.
I thank the Taoiseach for his further clarification, and I would just urge you again to ensure that every opportunity that arises for Irish political leaders and for officials working in the United States is to keep this issue very much high on top of the agenda. You quite rightly state that that many people have not been able to travel home for family occasions, be they happy ones or sad ones. And all of us at Ascancora, particularly who represent rural constituencies, have representations every weekend from, in many instances, elderly parents who want a son or a daughter to be in a position to travel home. And we want to be able to assure them, Taoiseach, that this is a priority for government and that it's outside our legislative powers, but the only thing we can do that you can do in government is to keep it very high on the agenda in all discussions with members of Congress and with officials in President Obama's administration as well.
Thank you, Deputy. Final reply, Taoiseach.
Well, I want to say that this is very much a priority for the government. There is, and I don't want to lead people to kind of false expectations here either, because there have been some false dawns in relation to what might happen on immigration reform in the United States and in relation to visa-related issues. But there's been clearly very positive signals. The speeches which have been made by President Obama, which have been absolutely explicit that he wants to see legislation on this. On foot of that, the approach that we are taking is I'm doing a round of telephone conversations with key people, key United States senators who are involved in this issue. Our embassy in Washington is very, very much across it, and we intend to use the St. Patrick's. Both Taoiseach and I will be in the United States over the St. Patrick's Day period. We will both be in Washington. We intend to use that opportunity to talk with key political figures and figures in the US administration about this. It's difficult. I mean, it's not really for us to predict a time frame here, because really that's in the hands of the US legislature. But we have, we have got a feel for what is happening here and what is possible from the discussions, certainly discussions that I've been having with United States senators and Congress.
Thank you, Taoiseach. Gesture Coig, priority question in the name of Deputy Clare Daly, and I call on the Taoiseach.
I am very aware of the cases to which the Deputy refers, and my officials monitor these and other cases very closely. The first individual referred to has been detained since the 13th of May 2011, following the revocation of her life sentence by the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland. Genuine concerns have repeatedly been expressed about several aspects of this case by deputies on many occasions, and I have raised them very frankly with the British government, most recently when I met the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland on Monday the 11th of February. I have been advised that the parole commissioners will determine on the issue of her continued detention in March. In relation to the second individual referred to, the British authorities have confirmed that he was released under licence in 1992. Secretary of State for Northern Ireland revoked that licence in April 2010, and the individual has, as a result, been in custody for the past 2 years and 9 months. I understand that an appeal in relation to the case will be heard by the Supreme Court in Belfast shortly. As the case is the subject of an ongoing legal process, it would be inappropriate to comment further at this time.
Chuck the Clare Daly.
Thanks, Cora, and I do appreciate that the Taoiseach has raised these matters, but I think all of us need to do more. We were party to a cross-party delegation that went to McGarry and visited both Martin Corey and Marion Price in the last week or two, and I have to say the health of Marion Price in particular is a cause for grave concern. And I think we all have a role of putting pressure not just on the British authorities but also the Northern Ireland administration, because Deputy O'Sullivan is quite correct. Minister Ford could release these people on compassionate grounds at the stroke of a pen. The issue here is a really serious one, and I'm shocked actually that the media haven't taken it on further. Here we have two people who have been in prison for almost 2 and 3 years respectively. They don't know the charges against them. Their solicitors are not entitled to the evidence against them. In the case of Marion Price in the Parole Commission hearing, a representative is being appointed on her behalf to represent her. This is a person that she can't meet, who can't discuss with her and can't talk to her. This person will attend her hearing, which will be held behind closed doors, which she herself is not allowed to go to. Now, if this was going on in some tin pot African dictatorship. They could be banging down the drums demanding justice. It's happening on this island, and it is absolutely, in my opinion, unlawful and disgraceful. And I would echo the point made by Deputy. Can we get some official in here from the Southern Government to go in and be a public voice at that hearing? Can we demand that the case is held in public, that Marion Price herself can go, that her solicitor can go, and could we begin to address these cases in the broader European Union community, because it's a serious erosion of civil rights?
Well, last Kilgore, there are two cases referred to in the question. As I said, in one case, there is a Supreme Court hearing to be held shortly on that, so I can't really say anything further about that particular case. In relation to the second case, the position there, as I've said earlier, is that the individual was sentenced to 2 life terms of imprisonment and 20 years imprisonment to run concurrently. Then in March of 1975 she was transferred from prison in England to Armagh prison. On the 30th of April she was released from Armagh on humanitarian grounds. That release was on licence, and that licence was then revoked on the 15th of May 2011 by the then Secretary of State for Northern Ireland. There was then an issue about the terms of that revocation. The Secretary of State for Northern Ireland and the Northern Ireland Office informed us that the parole commissioners considered the terms of the Royal Prerogative of Mercy after receiving submissions on behalf of the prisoner, and the Secretary of State had ruled that the life sentences were not in fact remitted by the Royal Prerogative of Mercy, and that the individual remained subject to the life sentence. Prisons policy itself, conditions prevailing within them, is a devolved matter which is the responsibility of the Department of Justice in Northern Ireland and an executive agency of that department and the Northern Ireland Police Service. I have received a briefing on the assessment of the parliamentary delegation which visited Maghaberry prison. My officials are monitoring this situation very closely. It is the subject of discussion between me and the Secretary of State and between officials of my department and corresponding officials in the Northern Ireland office, and that will continue to be the case. I'm very much aware.
Supplementary.
I think, if people have done something wrong and have broken the law, they should of course be brought to justice and brought to trial. This is the opposite case. Here we have people imprisoned for a period of years whose cases have been heard in open court. They've been found to have no case to answer, and then secret evidence is introduced behind closed doors. Now, this is a fundamental attack on human rights and civil rights for everybody in Irish society and beyond, in my opinion. The idea that the royal pardon didn't cover the sentences, we don't know that, because the actual official excuse is that it's gone missing. So how do we know actually what has been specified in it? And the real issue here is, why does Martin Corey have to go to the Supreme Court? An open court has already said he's no case to answer. These are really serious matters. I mean, it is 41 years since Bloody Sunday, where people marched against internment. Now there's a new administration, a new power structure, but there's people in prison who don't know what they're there for. And the Northern Ireland Minister for Justice could, at the stroke of the pen, release these 2 people. And hopefully, when it comes to next month's Minister's questions, we don't have these 2 cases on it, because I honestly believe that if Marion Price is not released soon on the compassionate grounds, given her ill health, it will be a seriously destabilising situation in the north over the foreseeable future.
Well, in both cases, in one case, as I've said, there is the Supreme Court hearing, which is, my information is that that is due to be held shortly. I know there was a date earlier in the month for it, and it didn't. The hearing wasn't held on that date, but I understand that there is to be a new date shortly. The parole commissioners. My understanding is that they are going to hear the Marion Price case in early March. 3 dates have been indicated to me as to when it will be held, and it has been indicated to us that there will be a decision shortly after that. Now, clearly, we can't prejudge what that decision is likely to be, but I will certainly be keeping a very close watch on what is happening, and my officials will be doing that on my behalf.
We now go on to other questions, and Ceiste Shea is in the name of Deputy Seamus Kirk. I call him the first.
Lascan Corla, I issued a statement on the 12th of February condemning in the strongest possible terms the decision by the Democratic People's Republic of North Korea, the DPRK, to test a nuclear explosive device on the 12th of February 2013. This action directly threatens peace and stability on the Korean peninsula and was a clear violation of North Korea's international obligations under United Nations Security Council resolutions 1718, 1874 and 2087. It has been the position of successive Irish governments that nuclear weapons have never and will never guarantee the security of any nation. The very existence of these weapons threatens security. Following this test, the international community has been united in its strong disapproval of this action, and there has been strong condemnation to this effect by the EU, the US and China. The United Nations Security Council has also strongly condemned the test. The members of the Security Council unanimously adopted Resolution 2087 on the 22nd of January, which expressed the Council's determination to take significant action in the event of a further test. In line with this commitment, following this latest nuclear test, the members of the Security Council have begun work on appropriate measures in a Security Council resolution. The European Union Foreign Affairs Council on the 18th of February agreed unanimously that additional restrictive measures be taken against North Korea. Together with my EU colleagues, I agreed to further strengthen sanctions against North Korea by adopting EU autonomous measures, which are in addition to those already contained in UN Security Council Resolution 2087. These further measures in particular concern trade in conventional weapons involving North Korea and in relation to the export to North Korea of certain key components for ballistic usage. At the Foreign Affairs Council, Ireland, together with our EU partners, further called upon the DPRK to re-engage constructively with the international community, in particular with the members of the six-party talks, and to work towards lasting peace and security on the Korean peninsula. The European Union stands ready to continue to work with its partners in support of these objectives.
Thank you, Lascan Corla. I thank the Tánaiste for his reply, and I think I welcome the fact that he issued a strong statement and that this matter has been taken very seriously at the Foreign Affairs Council meeting recently as well. I think one very worrying commentary that I saw reported was that North Korea threatened South Korea with final destruction during a debate at the UN Conference on Disarmament very recently, and the talk about taking a second and third steps after the nuclear test last week, which obviously needs to be dealt with at UN and EU level and at every appropriate forum very seriously. Could the Tánaiste tell me if the additional sanctions that the Foreign Affairs Council agreed on Monday, when will they become effective? And also, could I ask the Tánaiste, if North Korea continues to pursue nuclear ballistic capability, as they have indicated, what steps will the European Union take to address the destabilisation of the Korean peninsula? And in conclusion, Lascan Corla, could I also ask the Tánaiste, when is it expected that the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty will come into force? Am I correct in thinking that that awaits signature by 8 states? And also, is that under the remit of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, or is it under the remit of the International Atomic Energy Agency? Thank you, Lascan Corla.
Well, first of all, a number of questions. Firstly, in relation to the comments which were made in Geneva yesterday by the DPRK that South Korea would face final destruction if it continued to press for tougher sanctions against North Korea at the United Nations. The comments which were made by the DPRK representative at the Conference on Disarmament in Geneva yesterday are totally unacceptable and only serve to exacerbate an already tense situation. For North Korea to make such an explicit threat against its neighbour is quite reckless, it's wholly irresponsible, and such language is all the more reprehensible given that the comments were made at a United Nations forum, the purpose of which was to promote global disarmament. In relation to the coming into effect of the sanctions, the intention is that those sanctions will come into effect straight away. In relation to the destabilisation of the Korean Peninsula and the potential for destabilisation of it, the European Union will work very closely with the United Nations on this issue. We've encouraged the resumption of the six-party talks, and I think that a very clear message is now being given to North Korea that the international community wants it to engage in these talks and wants it to discontinue nuclear testing. The Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty, there are, as Deputy Smith says, 8 countries who have yet to ratify that treaty, and indeed there are 3 countries who haven't even signed it, and one of those, of course, is the DPRK.
Deputy Crowe.
Are we not lumping these questions together anymore? You know, I think there was 38 and 49 there was on the same subject. You know, I don't know who makes that decision, but anyway, no, it's just there's a number of other ones coming up and similar. Anyway, I know it's not your responsibility, but I've just noticed recently that we tend to be not doing that anymore, and I just wonder, is that a new policy or whatever? No, it's just on the thing, this whole issue. I suppose Britain has talked about, you know, the further isolate North Korea, but I just wonder how you can actually isolate them even more. You know, the regime is living in a bubble. They're living in fantasy land. We all accept that, you know. But I think the only way you're actually going to break down some of the rhetoric is that, you know, the people actually talk to them, and maybe people visit them or wherever else, and you know, it's through that outreach that hopefully it will break out. But I suppose the question I have is, I suppose the main concern people have is, right, we've heard what they said in relation to South Korea, and they're still also saying in relation to if the Americans take action, they're talking about stepping up things in relation to that. But I suppose it's the worry of the proliferation of nuclear weapons in the region. Like, you know, is the Japanese going to do the same as the South Koreans? Yeah, we don't expect them to, but I'm just, you know, that's the worry of it in relation to it, and their alignment with other countries around the world in relation to it. So I suppose what I'd be suggesting is that we try and initiate in relation. I know there was discussions going on, but maybe someone needs to look outside the loop. Is there nothing different that we as an independent nation can do in relation to North Korea or other conflicts around the world? Maybe.
Deputy Smith.
Thank you, Laskin Corda. Could I just ask the Taoiseach if there was any discussion at the Council meeting in regard to the commentary at the weekend that Iran's leading nuclear scientists travelled to North Korea for this particular nuclear test? And as we know, advocates and friends of Iran in this country would always state that their nuclear capability is being developed from the point of view for peaceful purposes and as a source of energy, whereas North Korea declares that it's building weapons as a deterrent, they would say, to hostile powers, obviously for aggression purposes. And was this particular issue discussed at the Council meeting? Thank you, Laskin Corda.
Well, first of all, to take up Deputy Crowe's point, first of all, about the issue of isolation. Ireland does have diplomatic relations with North Korea, and through the exercise, we don't have a resident embassy there, but through our diplomatic relations, we do make our point of view very clearly known and independently known. Ireland has taken, over many decades, a leading role in relation to nuclear non-proliferation. We're very clear in our view, one of the leading countries in the world who says that nuclear weapons pose a huge threat to humanity, to peace in the world and to stability in the world, and that the idea, for example, that you develop a nuclear weapon as some form of a defence mechanism is just wrong. That what we have to do is we have to rid the world of nuclear weapons, and that is why we have been such a strong proponent of the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty and the Non-Proliferation Treaty, and we continue to make that point of view very clearly known in all international fora. We didn't have the conclusions on North Korea were agreed. There wasn't a lengthy discussion on North Korea at the European Union Foreign Affairs Council on Monday. There have been discussions previously on several occasions about the situation in Iran. What we're anxious to do there is to get the E3+3 talks going and effective. And that is why a sanctions regime was agreed by the European Union in relation to Iran to encourage them back to the table to engage in the E3+3 talks. They have come back to the table. Unfortunately, there hasn't been a very meaningful engagement at the table so far. And that is the approach the European Union is taking on the situation in Iran and Iran's nuclear ambitions is to get them to comply with what the IAEA wants them to comply with.
Yesterday shocked is in the name of Deputy Joe McHugh, Deputy John Deasy has been nominated in his place as Deputy Taoiseach.
As I said in my earlier response, the position of the undocumented Irish immigrants in the United States is an important priority for the government. President Obama has indicated his strong support for progress on comprehensive immigration reform. Work is currently underway in Congress on agreeing the terms of the reform, and the indications of emerging bipartisan support for reform are encouraging. In this regard, the Embassy in Washington has intensified its contacts with members of Congress to ensure that the interests and concerns of undocumented Irish immigrants are captured in any future legislative deal in this area that emerges. In addition, I am currently undertaking a round of contacts with key senators. I spoke with Senator John McCain on the 8th of February last to discuss the prospects for progress and to express the government's appreciation for the efforts that he and others are making in developing bipartisan Senate proposals and to underline our ongoing interest in the issue. I look forward to continuing my contacts with other senators in the coming weeks. The Taoiseach and I will be in the United States to fulfil St. Patrick's Day engagements, and we will take every opportunity to discuss this issue further in our contacts at political level. My department is also in close and regular contact with the Irish community groups who provide assistance to the undocumented and who are promoting immigration reform.
Come on, John Deasy.
Thanks. Yeah, I listened to the Taoiseach's response to Deputy Smith. With regard to advice and the best advice being that comprehensive legislation was the best way of securing a deal on the undocumented issue, I disagree with that. It hasn't been the only advice, and in fact the people who have been giving the advice that it isn't the best way of getting a deal for the Irish have been proven right, unfortunately, for the last 20 years. The problem is there never has been a plan B, and it's never been actually put into operation properly by this government, unfortunately, or the previous one. As far as emerging bipartisan support being encouraging, I think it's too early to say. Over the weekend, I don't know if the Taoiseach is aware of this, but the White House leaked a draft, the draft, about immigration reform. One of the three senators who was critical on the Republican side said that Senator Rubio, the other two being McCain and Lindsey Graham, Senator Rubio said that if the draft arrived on Capitol Hill, it was dead on arrival. I think there have been a lot of false stones. I think we've made progress with regard to the E3. It isn't going to cover, as you said, the bulk of the undocumented and Irish, of the undocumented Irish. But I have a concern. And you've talked with these senators, and you're going to be over the coming days. But who are you speaking to on the Republican side in the House held, in the House of Representatives, which is held by the Republican Party?
Well, first of all, I think we have to recognise when circumstances change. I think if anybody addressing this question a year ago, more than a year ago, would certainly have said that comprehensive immigration reform was largely off the agenda in the United States. It is back on the agenda, and I think we have to recognise that. And it's been put back on the agenda because it was an issue in the United States presidential election. And President Obama has made a number of very clear statements about it in the aftermath of the election. And on the back of that, I think it is appropriate I think it is the right thing to do, that we pursue that, and that we pursue it in the interests of the undocumented Irish who are in the United States. I am aware of the statement that was made by Senator Marco Rubio. We are in touch with I mean, the key people that we're in touch with on the Republican side, Deputy DC has asked about, is Senator McCain. I've spoken to him directly. Senator Lindsey Graham, Senator Rubio, Senator Flake, Congressman Paul Ryan, Congressman Jim Sensenbrenner, and of course we have also been discussing this with Senator Schumer, Senator Durbin, Senator Menendez, Senator Bennett, Democratic side, Senator Leahy, Senator Kirk. So there is a broad range of people on Capitol Hill that we have been in contact with. The issue of comprehensive immigration reform is back on the agenda. People can speculate about whether this is a false dawn or a real dawn, but our responsibility is to pursue it, and to pursue it in the interests of the 50,000 or so undocumented Irish in the United States.
Deputy DC.
The names you read out there, Taoiseach, in many cases are the usual suspects. Reality is, over the last 10 or 15 years, we've lost sway on Capitol Hill. And we've lost sway in particular with the Republican Party. You know, unless an executive order is signed, this needs to go through Congress. The House is held by the Republicans. It's actually hardened, their opinions have hardened with regard to immigration over the last 5 or 6 years. We haven't made any inroads into that party with regard to convincing them that a standalone deal, if necessary, is good for them. I want to remind you of something. When it came to the green cards, it was Republican presidencies that allowed that to happen, under Bush and Reagan. When it came to the visa waiver bill, which has helped Ireland so much over the last 18 years, it was a Republican-dominated Congress that actually passed that legislation. The Clinton administration was against it. Unless we have a return to the kind of situation that we had 20 years ago with, in particular, the Republican Party, and if comprehensive immigration reform fails again, we're going to be left in the same position we are now.
Thank you, Deputy. Taoiseach, two other deputies want to ask.
Well, I think
after this,
I'm not sure that it helps our cause here to engage in commentary on what is really the politics of the United States. Politics of the United States is a matter for people of the United States and Congress and Senate, and I'm not going to engage in, you know, which administration or which Congress or which majority hold a particular view. As far as we're concerned, as a government, we will work with both sides of the aisle. We'll work with both Democrats and Republicans. My assessment is that this is an issue that requires a bipartisan approach. We worked, for example, in relation to the E3 issue on a bipartisan basis. I had a very good discussion last week with Senator John McCain, very frank discussion about these issues. I hope that I will be able to see him and some of his colleagues during the course of the St. Patrick's Day events, and we intend to pursue that. And you know, if there is any assistance that any member of the House can provide to us in relation to entree either to a particular party or to representatives of that party, we'll be very, very gladly avail of it.
Briefly, Deputy Naughton and Deputy Crowe. Deputy Naughton. Sorry, Deputy.
Washington on the St. Patrick's Day.
It's a contact list in the Republican Party.
Deputy Naughton.
Thank you, Lascan
We could all be giving phone numbers.
Briefly, Lascan Corda, if I can ask,